I'm Leta, that's my mom, that is human being. Bing, bing.
And that is her introduction of the podcast. John, thank you so much for joining us today on Leta's Tap Styles and My Autistic Life. I have this uncanny ability that when I introduce our guest, the AI machines think I'm artificial intelligence and that this is all AI made. So do you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Yeah, look, thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to having this chat. Um, I'm John Osha. I'm based in Australia. I've just completed my second book, actually. The first book was Dyslexia: How Do We Learn, and I published that in the 80s. And so I've just released my second book, which is called Neuro Spicy, and yeah, it's about my life, and I guess the tagline of it is the memory of madness, magic, ADHD, and dyslexia. And that sort of pretty much sums it up.
I know I've been reading the book and you've had such an amazing life. I have no clue where to start. Do you mind if I start from the beginning?
Yeah, no problem at all. No problem at all. Um, you know, I grew up in Victoria, Australia. I went to public schools at my earlier age and then into private school, but always have struggled, always struggled very, very intensely with ADHD and dyslexia, and that made schooling very, very difficult and quite painful. Really, it was a process of enormous amount of failure through those early years, which I think I probably carried on into later in life as well.
I know a lot of people, when they find out Leta has severe dyslexia, they're like, oh, I didn't know you were stupid. And it's like, you didn't think she was stupid 2 seconds ago. What changed?
Yeah, it is sad that it's labelled in such a way that people, and I still today have people that look upon me because I spell words incorrectly, the grammar I use is incorrect in the written format. And yeah, you are labelled. Without a doubt, you're labelled. And I think even with ADHD, people are very much labelled, that, you have this attention deficit disorder, which is completely wrong. It's the wrong name. It is not attention deficit disorder. It's actually an overload of information that comes in. And so therefore, trying to process so much data all the time makes you sort of want to turn off. And so that's where the disorder sort of a process. But in fact, it's actually a genius. It's something that's really, really fantastic and something that should be, celebrated and understood. And then not only understood, but then how do we then maximize that skill set that's not maximized in the normal traditional way of the education system? And now I think that's something that really needs to be addressed on how we do that. And I'd like to chat a bit more about that, whether it's autism, ADHD, dyslexia, whatever it may be, math, all these difficulties that we all have.
All the ones like dyscalculia, and the number of teachers I know who are like in middle school, elementary school, and high school over here, oh, you have trouble with numbers. You'll never be into the high sciences. And I'm like, I have a PhD in physics. Hand me the calculator because I don't remember what 2 + 2 equals.
Yeah, yeah. No, exactly. So it is difficult. Hang on just 2 seconds. Yeah, look, it is difficult in regards to how we deal with this information and how we're treated. And I think that's probably something that is really, really important, that people actually understand that because we're different, and not only us, but a whole lot of people. Some people are very, very difficult to stand up and do public speaking. It's one of the big fears. I don't have any problem with that, but if you asked me to stand up and read something out aloud, I'd have sweaty palms and be shaking and very, very nervous to do that, because although I can read efficiently today, I still carry an enormous amount of that anxiety and pressure from school. I remember when you have to read out aloud and they'd go around the class and you're getting close to your turn. I'd just say I have to go to the toilet and then wouldn't go back to the class. just for the fear of having to read.
Did you want to say something, Leta?
So all you widows out there who keep telling my mama that I shouldn't be homeschooled and that I should go to normal human being school. Yeah, that's the reason why I shouldn't. I will stay homeschooled.
Well, you're probably lucky in some essence, because the education system is very structured in the way in which you learn. And so you learn on a very much a linear or a vertical, and I call it a train track. It doesn't have a lot of flexibility, and it doesn't have a lot of alternative processing. So you're probably actually lucky in one way. There's probably the social aspect, which gets missed out from the homeschooling, but there's lots of events you can join. There's lots of classes, gymnastics. You're a practical example of that with what you're doing, with your own centre. And I think that's really, really important, that we don't recognise that homeschool is a negative. In fact, one of my children was at a private school, and we brought him into a homeschooling environment, but his whole education process was around surfing, because at the time that's what he loved. So we had maths around surfing, English around surfing, science. So you think, oh, well, how can you do that to make it for surfing? But if you think about it, mathematics, to design a surfboard, design the skegs, to do the weight, to do all of that stuff, how you put the fiberglass on, that all needs maths. If you then turned around and said, okay, well, what's another example of maths? So one of the things that the teachers were doing was they were trying to get them to work out how many paddle strokes it would take for them to go from one part of the beach to another part of the beach. But then they practically got in the water and tested it. Now, they just loved going to school because they were doing something that was their passion, which was sport, which was surfing. They were getting to do that on a regular basis in an environment, and then being taught everything around it. So, the science, I remember them going to the beach and they were learning about how waves worked, how the volcanoes made effect, and all of these things. And it was just using natural environments of something that they were very lucky with. So, Leta, I think you're probably lucky in a way to be homeschooled.
She did go to school for a little bit, but she was in a private kindergarten, and they kept losing her. And I was getting tired of having the law enforcement guys in our town call me up going, "Are you missing something?"
They abandoned me on a magician stage once.
They left her at the state fair.
Right. Well, we have had the same experience. We did when I was picking up the kids once, and I've got 4 children. I did leave one behind. So yeah, it does happen from time to time.
I almost got hit by it.
Right.
I
Right.
almost became rock camp.
Well, you're at a state fair, were you?
Yeah, they were at the state fair, and it was with her school group. Her dad and I were not chaperoning, and I got a call from one of my deputy sheriff's friends going, "Hi, we have Leta. I think her school left her. We have filled her up on sugar. Would you like her back?" And I'm like, "Yes, but when she's done with the sugar crash." And then another one, she was at school. She got out somehow. It was by a busy road. And one of my buddies was like, "Hi, I was driving down the road. I saw Leta. I put her in the back of my squad car. We went for ice cream. Do you want her back?" And I'm like, once more, we don't necessarily have to hype her up on sugar.
Wait, what do you mean somehow? I still remember how I got out.
Theoretically speaking, the schools are supposed to keep track of you.
Yeah.
I think
But
boys around the playground are bigger than the tiny child, and tiny child squeeze throughable.
yeah. They need to make it more childproof just for Leta.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, that's why she wound up. I'm like, if I'm having to do that, plus, like you've hinted or said, she learned so much differently than everyone else at school. So she would go to school for 6.5 hours a day at 5. And then I would have to take her home and do another 4 hours to try and teach what they were supposed to be teaching at school anyways.
Yeah. And I think that learning process is an interesting topic. If you think about Gardner had a theory that there was 8 forms of intelligence, and he was a renowned expert on this. And I believe that there's probably 8 billion forms of intelligence. So if we just took music, which is one form of intelligence, but have a look at people. People can play it from ear. People can play it from reading it. People can play, a guitar but can't play the piano. People can play the piano and can't play the trumpet. So all of those forms just in music, which Gardner said was one form, there's thousands of forms of intelligence. And so it's difficult when you think about, people like us that have alternative ways of learning and taking data in. You can understand probably the education system, why it is probably a little bit limited, and why it's really focusing on people to go back into the university system, which is then the same teachers that are teaching the same system. So the system works, but only for 30 to 40% of the community. And I'm not sure about in the US, but I'm sure the statistics are very much the same. And that is that up to 30% of people, when they leave the education system, are illiterate to some form or shape. And that means that they're not expert in the reading and writing, or they're not expert in normal school activities. So they have a very difficult task to be able to capture all of those types of intelligences and different ways of being able to learn, especially when they're being taught and trained only to appreciate the traditional methods of learning. And so there's a big gap there, a massive gap.
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the last numbers I saw on our kids coming out of school without being able to read and being considered illiterate, it's more like 60%. We have Harvard University grads who are now suing because they were valedictorian of their high school. They were Dean's List at Harvard, and then they got out and they realized they are completely illiterate. And she is showing off her puppy dog.
Right. I thought you were showing off your messy room that you hadn't cleaned.
It was clean, and then he came down to play this morning, and it's not clean anymore.
Right. Yeah, I think look, and it's an issue right across the globe. Probably not as much in China because they're very, very disciplined, and probably Japan, but they're also different in there's not a substantial number of those people that are necessarily CEOs outside of their country. They're very successful inside the country, but if you look at the US or Australia or England, the majority of very, very successful business people are on the spectrum, and they are either ADHD or dyslexic, whether they've been labelled that or not. And that statistic is quite profound. I think it's around about 35 to 40% of the top CEOs. I'm not talking about people that are in business that are running their own everyday, small business, because that's probably even a larger number. But the very, very top, the Elon Musks of the world and these types of people, it is astounding that we don't have specific learning processes built into the system for that type of a person. Where's the dyslexic class, which is specifically dedicated to people that learn differently, to teach them how to use those muscles, how to use that thought process. We go to the gym, put enormous, if you're on the sports team, or if you're in the music team or the band, or you're in any of these things, the gymnastics team, whatever it may be, there's an enormous amount of energy put into making you better at that. I think that's, I call it a superpower, but no one's ever given me a course. No one's ever given me training. It's just something that I've had to adapt and learn to over time through survival. And that's something that I think I want to address going forward in my next stage of life is to come up with that type of a program. And the other thing is that I'm also on the website for those that are interested. I want to hear your stories because, and it's Neuro Spicy. So I'm going to spell it very slowly, but it's NEURO Spicy, which is SPICY .life. If you go there and you add your story to the website, I'm going to publish the next book, which is going to be a collection of maybe 10, 15 stories of different people so that we can get an alternative view. So it's not just my view, but everyone's view. So, Leta could write her story and explain what it's like for her, what are her advantages and disadvantages and what makes her tick and enjoy things. And then we're going to publish that. That's going to be the next stage. And then obviously going into alternative ways of being able to get other people's messages out there.
And I think that's something that sometimes the education system doesn't completely understand is each person's dyslexia, each person's dysgraphia, each person's dyscalculia, ADHD, autism, they're a spectrum and they're all different.
Totally. It has to be. Everything is on different levels. And so, with my dyslexia, I'm, if it was out of 1 to 10, I'm probably a 9. So I go, yay, look how successful I am. I'm really successful being dyslexic. How fantastic. And, it is something that should be celebrated. And it is something that should be appreciated. Yet we still have this stigma that we're doing it. Yet, I've just talked about all these amazing CEOs. And there was one CEO that was not even known to the world, but the America's Cup was owned by, won by the Americans for, I think it was 149 years. And a gentleman by the name of Ben Lexham, who is an Australian, designed the wing keel. Now, he left school at age 12, was very, very dyslexic. And he designed the wing keel, which we then won the America's Cup for the first time. You'd lost it to us. But now look at racing, look at surfboards, look at all of these stuff. They've all got a wing keel on them. And yet he's, a quiet achiever. He's passed now. But, if we had that person that was lateral and thinking outside of the box, there's endless, the iPhone, all of the inventions. And then I think on top of that, if you look at the statistics of NASA goes out of its way to want to employ dyslexic people because it's not normal to go into space. You need to be able to think outside the box. Let's celebrate that. Let's understand that and let's champion it. That's my motto.
My sister gets a lot of people coming up and asking her because her kids are also dyslexic. When people get that diagnosis, oh, my child's dyslexic, they're like, so how have you come to terms with your kids aren't going to do anything? And her response is usually, did you enjoy turning on the light switch tonight at your house? Yes, I designed this. I'm severely dyslexic. Your child is going to be just fine.
I'm sorry. I feel like the question should be more, how did all children not come out? I don't know. Maybe not. How did God, it's all...
All yeah. All 4 of my nieces and nephews from that sister, they are all dyslexic.
Wow.
Okay, she's got 2 girls and 2 boys.
That's a lot of chaos. That's a lot of chaos in one house.
How's it all 4? So I feel like the more important question should be...
So
well,
the
it's an
autistic
interesting
in her is
question
like,
because we still don't know what causes it. And so I remember, I think my father was a little bit dyslexic. I don't think he was overly dyslexic, but definitely dyslexic. But he was a genius at maths. So there you go. But, there was the theory that it was hereditary. There's, the theory that there may be social and environmental impacts. There may be something that happened at birth, something that happened in the womb. They really still today don't have a fair understanding of what it is. And we still talk about it as, oh, you get your words upside down, or you read things, or you see things differently. And yes, we do, but that's really a byproduct of the thought process. It's actually the process of thinking is different. And that if you're dyslexic, then you think of things very, very differently. You have a different perspective on things, and you see things that maybe other people don't see, and you hear things that other people don't hear. But then if you put the ADHD in there, then it's sort of like a superpower. It's sort of like puts it on, like I talk about it, it's like having a mind like a V8 engine with no brakes. It's flat out all the time, and it's hyperactive. And so if you get little bits of distraction coming in or little bits of information coming in from the side, it's very, very easily to be distracted and to get off center.
I was trying to write something to one of our interns at the dance studio yesterday, and my husband was home, and I'm like, you've got to make the dog be quiet because he's distracting me. And my husband, without missing a beat, went, did you just write bark, 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 woof, woof, woof? Because that's what I would be doing, honey.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me more about the studio. How does that work?
So we have done an entire neurodivergent dance studio. She's excited because there are no neurotypical people.
I just said why again? Are we explaining this? I've heard this a billion times. At this point, I'm pretty sure that this is just tattooed into my brain.
So she keeps getting, it's a nonprofit, it's a charity. She's going to be saying a lot of this over and over again. And she's 14 and she's definitely a teenager. But we do have to work. People don't understand that the dyslexia and the different processing does affect how we have to teach dance, because how they're teaching the kids to spot on a wall, you have to be able to track exactly that spot as you're turning and then whip your head around and grab that spot again. And a lot of our dancers who are dyslexic can't do that. You lose that spot and you've probably lost it until you can stop and find it again.
Wow. Okay. So how do you process that?
So we determined that the whole deal is to throw the way you're teaching how to spot and dance, throw it out the window. And we noticed Leta can do some jump turns that other people can't. And we realized maybe we just let the brain figure out how to use the eyes to track.
I'm sure the boys will get it one of these days.
Oh, that's interesting. So do the boys
will get it one of these days?
So the boys aren't as good as the girls?
They're not as good as her specifically.
Right. Okay.
And by boys, we're talking 40 to 50-year-old dancers who are trained professional dancers cannot do some of the turns she can do because they're very neurotypical and do not have any form of dyslexia. And the way she doesn't, you want to talk?
Did you just say neurotypical? Did you go people neurotypical?
Not dyslexic. Can we agree that they're not dyslexic, most likely? Okay. They are not diagnosed neurodivergent, so we're going to call them neurotypical for the sake of this conversation.
Right.
But they have been trying for 5 years, and because you have to be able, she doesn't track at all. She also has an eye tracking problem on top of the dyslexia problem, plus a lazy eye. Nothing like trying to make sure there's too many eye issues at once, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. And so she's learned how to do it. The boys, like she said, they cannot seem to do it. The girls also tried to do it that she knows. And these are, trained professional dancers. And they're like, yeah, we can't figure out how you just don't care where you're looking.
Unlike the boys,
Right.
they decided not to try for 5 on.
It's an interesting thing because I learnt to read and write when I was about 24, and the way in which the lady helped me do that was she had a lot of kinesthetic background, and so that learning of the body and how the body gets affected by certain events. But one of the things that she did was she asked me. I was a ski instructor when I was younger. So she asked me to describe what it was like to be a skier. And so I did. And then she said, "I'll describe what it's like to ski in a whiteout, when there's, you can't see." And I did. And she goes, okay, now describe hanging off a chairlift with one arm. And I found it very difficult to describe it. And she said, well, what you do is you learn by doing. So you may learn it differently to what someone else, but once you do it, then it gets really, really ingrained into your DNA. So if we put that into a written format, how do you do that? So if I was going to make a cake, if I was to read the instructions to make a cake, I'm going to probably most likely fail. But if I watch someone making a cake and I help make the cake and I'm a part of the process, then I'll remember how to make the cake, if that sort of makes sense. So what Leta's doing is that she's not necessarily getting it right the first time, but once she starts getting it right, it's in her DNA, and it's so much different to a normal person that may have to focus and study it and do it over and over and over. Also going back to that cookbook and having to use the cookbook over and over again. In my case, I don't have to, because it's already processed. So it's a different way of learning, which I think is really interesting, that, and especially the physical, makes it even easier to learn that process.
I think that's one thing we've noticed across the board with the dancers is you can't just tell them how to do something. You show it to them and you help them work it through.
I mean, it's called dance, not let's talk till the face of the planet ends. It's called dance, not talk class.
And do you like the dance shows that are on TV, or the celebrity dances?
No.
They have that there. We have that here.
No.
No, you don't like that? Have I gone down the terrible path, John? How dare you talk about that?
I want to burn them and throw them in hell and just drop kick them into space so they can pop like a blueberry or a balloon. It's like, squish like a blueberry. Like, squish it. Squish it. Burn it. Send it to hell.
I should explain that some of her friends have been on some of those shows and
right.
did not have the best time on like Dance Moms.
Yes, and I still
Yeah,
think
right.
that her mother is evil.
Yeah.
And so her opinion of the show.
Evil mothers. Their mothers are evil. I don't like any of their moms. Especially the ones I know's mom. I don't care if she
What happens if
regrets
they're
her.
listening to this?
She did.
Leta?
Dance Moms, I don't know if it ever aired in Australia with like Abby Lee Miller and everything.
That's called
There
Sin
were-
Show of Sins. Sin Show. Sins upon sins upon sins upon.
Well, in fact,
I'll
I
probably
haven't
go
watched.
to hell.
I haven't watched TV in probably 20 years, and we don't actually even own a TV. So I'm not probably the right person to ask about those sorts of shows at all, but I do know that they exist.
a lot of they needed to make drama happen, so they
Oh, yeah.
decided to force the drama to happen. Reality TV is way more scripted.
Yeah.
We have a TV. I have gotten her into like the old 50s and 60s TV shows on DVD. So
Oh, fantastic. The Jetsons.
we've done a
I
don't think we've done the
Genie?
Jetsons in a while.
Yeah, the Jetsons. That
We
was
did
one of my
I Dream of
favorites.
Genie, Gunsmoke, Bonanza, High
Oh,
Chaparral.
Bonanza. Wow, that's,
I like High Chaparral.
yeah.
High Chaparral
Rum.
probably was only a U.S. one. It only ran for a few years over here.
And then a bit more famous
But
one
it
was
was-
Dallas. Dallas was a very famous one, wasn't it?
It was filmed a few miles from where my parents grew up.
And sorry, are we
Oh, wow,
suddenly
there you
talking
go.
about TV shows now, even though this is a complete and total wrong thing? And Dale?
She is my little producer. She tries to keep me on track with my
The whole
ADHD.
thing was not about Hollywood stuff. And nerdy stuff about Hollywood.
So the ADHD skipped a generation here. Her dad and I both have ADHD. She does not.
I go
Right.
with the flow.
And she's like, it must be nice to have to be the one to be keeping dad and mom on track all the time.
Yeah, well, that's right. That's what a great team.
I wanted to ask about the schooling again, because
Yep.
your life, it's not, how do I put this nicely? The dyslexia and the ADHD while it did cause some issues, it didn't hold you back completely.
No.
And like I said, my sister, she's an physical engineer. She graduated from one of the top engineering schools in the country. Please do not ask her to read something, or she's going to come up with every excuse in the book not to read it.
No, totally agree.
The university she went to, Colorado School of Mines, they don't ask you to read out loud because I'm pretty sure the professors don't want to read out loud.
No, yeah, for sure.
And it is a university that's entirely engineering, physics, and math. So you can guess how Neuro Spicy the school is.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
How much from your youth, from the school days, and I'm trying to figure out how to put this right. Do you ever think about what the teachers said to you back when you were in school and they were trying to make you read?
Look, I initially was quite angry about the whole education system and the failure that they had done, and I fundamentally think they're still failing today. On some levels, I think that the brochure looks better. They talk the shop a bit better, but the actual delivery I don't think's changed in probably 100 years. It may have changed in some format, but they recognise it, but it's still not fixed. They haven't fixed it. It's a bit like if you were to produce a stereo and it had a woofer and it had sound and it has all these buttons on it, and a cassette and CD and radio and all of that. If 50% of it didn't work, you wouldn't sell many stereos, would you? Yet that's the education system. It still rolls people out to the end, and 50% of it's not working. Like it's a failed system. But so I don't really give it credence. I don't allow the education system to be an excuse for the success or failures that I've had in life. And I've been very successful. I've had a lot of very successful opportunities, and I've done some really, really crazy things. And I'm happy to talk about, some of those. But a lot of that happened because I was dyslexic. So to give you an example, when I wrote my first book, I was very unhappy that it was in written format. It was an oxymoron. It was like, here's something that you failed at all your life, and now people are going, wow, you're an author. Isn't that fantastic? And even my school promoted me as being one of the successes of the school because I was an author. And I just like, you failed me, and yet now you're saying, oh, here's one of our champions. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to turn that into an animation cartoon series, so I could really explain what it was like, that your head explodes and, it's like a flip top and the information just flies out and you're just trying to grab these bits of information and so forth. But that was very difficult, but I had to explore that opportunity. So I got an animator. We started drawing up cartoons and doing the slides and everything else like that. And it was going to be a program to go into schools to teach kids what it was like to be dyslexic. I took this to a very famous, very wealthy, multi-billionaire in Australia who owned a cardboard recycling business. And I presented to him and said, would you sponsor it? And he said to me, John, to be fair, I don't really care about dyslexic people, but I do care about recycling and the environment. Would you do exactly the same program for me on recycling? Instantaneously, I said yes. And that's the dyslexic brain. And go, yes, yeah, that's not a problem at all. And he said, how much will that cost? I came up with a ridiculous number. He wrote out a check. And then I developed Ollie Recycles, which is now being used in schools in the UK and Australia, and has been in the system for nearly 30 years. And my son's learning to be a teacher, and he said they brought that product out and saying, here's something that you could use as a teaching aid to teach kids about recycling. So if I hadn't have been dyslexic, if I hadn't have been on the spectrum and a normal person, I would have just stayed in a linear format and gone, no, that's fine. I'm going to continue down this path and I'm going to go straight. So that led me into a business world, which then taught me about finance, taught me about budgeting, taught me about how to get graphic designers to work, how to do websites, CD-ROMs, all of that sort of stuff, internet. I got involved with that very early on. So that's sometimes the advantage of having these lateral thinking processes, that you can think so quickly, you can grasp information, and it gets you into a position which normal people may not be able to put them into that situation. And that's been the case with business. But then instead of me hanging on to that business, because we're talking 30 years ago, recycling was not even a topic 30 years ago. If I had kept that business, that would be massively more successful than what it is today. Today, it's just what I developed 30 years ago. It's never really gone anywhere. And I sold that business at the time for what I thought was a large amount of money. But in fact, it was insignificant to what I could have done with it. That's also a disadvantage of being dyslexic, because you don't stay focused all the time, and you're very, very easily able to be led down a path that is, this looks greener over here, this looks shinier, even though what you've done is very shiny and very, very good. It's sort of, I'm finished with that one, I'll go over here. And that's part of the learning process that, still today, I struggle with that.
What is your problem over there?
Okay, how do you go to a person with a disability? I don't care about people with your disability, and then turn around and go, now can you do this for me and what I want?
Yep.
It's called. I'm sorry, you what? Right there, right then. I'm sorry, you wanted this. Time before I feel that I should be giving, like, I don't know.
Well, this is what life's like. Life throws you up these opportunities. You can take the opportunity or not. And if you really fundamentally think that I should have stayed on that path, that's one choice. And I think everyone makes those choices all the time. And your whole life is a choice.
I think her complaint was more about the guy who suggested you change path.
I think that it was because that's his limit. He was only involved in that world of recycling. He was 60, 70 years of age. That was his approach to, what he was saying. I wasn't going to give you money for this, but I'll give you money for that. And so it is alternatives. And every day, Leta, we have these decisions that we have to make. And sometimes we make the right decision. Sometimes we make the wrong decision. It's called a crossroad. And you do that probably 1,000 times every day.
I just wanted to make sure you didn't think she was thinking you made the bad choice. She was
No,
more
that's
like...
fine. That's fine.
She's gotten
I'm very thick-skinned.
Especially in dance, she's had a lot of people say, give up the dance studio, just teach autistic and neurodiverse kids to fit into the neurotypical
I'm sorry,
dance.
you want to make me a god? You can give me offerings? You want to make me a god? You want to make me a god? I'll happily become a god. Of course, if I'm a god, I can smite ya people. So, yeah, make me a god. I want to do some smiting. I want to do smiting. I want to smite. I want to smite people. I want to smite ya people. So, yeah, make me a god. I want to smite ya people.
Her father has spent a little too much time introducing her to the world of mythology.
Oh, right. Okay.
So she's like, yes, make me Zeus, make me Poseidon, let me smite you.
I'll take Opie.
My
Take
daughter
Murder
was watching
Drowners.
Crown of Thorns or Thrones or something like that. That's the same sort of stuff, I think. So,
but yeah, she's had a lot of people go, well, this is a stupid idea. All you need to do is just force autistic people to make others feel comfortable around the autistic people, which also means you need to teach kids how to mask so that the dance teachers are comfortable teaching the autistic kids.
Well, plus,
yeah, right.
at least this makes you able to find who is racist quicker, too.
And ableist. But yeah, so that was where that rant was coming from, is she's a teenager.
Oh, also, we're at 40 minutes.
Oh, thank you. She also keeps me up on where we are on time, because I will lose track of time.
That's great. I love it. I love it.
You have done a lot, and we're going to have you on the show just to talk about your adventures. But you didn't stop at just making the recycling program. You went all over the world to do stuff.
Yeah.
How much did being ADHD and neurodivergent, Neuro Spicy play a part in that?
Oh, a lot. I had a background in outdoor education, so I'm very comfortable to sleep on the ground. I can light a fire. I can make, my kids always say if something ever happens and we go into no electricity or anything, let's go find Dad because he'll be able to keep us alive. So that that led into me being able to then do travel. So when I was young, I went to Nepal and I climbed all the way up to Tibet on my own, carrying my own backpack and so forth. And that was about 3 months. Then I got on a truck and went from Nepal all the way through to London, which took about 6 months. And we went through Nepal, India, Pakistan, Iran, Syria, Jordan, Israel, back into Turkey, Greece, and then European countries, or Germany and all those. And all the way along in through the Middle East, I slept on the ground, and we ate locally. Some mornings I would wake up, and because the wind would come in, I'd be completely covered in sand. And so, but there was also the adventure of you couldn't speak their language, but you had to communicate. And so that was a very, very comfortable thing for me to be able to do, whether it was sign language, whether it was, being animated and so forth. But there was other things that I would do that people that I was traveling with wouldn't do. For an example, when you go into Iran, and the US was at war with Iran at the time, as they probably still are, but they made you change a certain amount of currency at the border, which they gave you $1 Iranian for. On the black market, I could get $800 Iranian dollars for the $1. And so we would then use people at the border that you would give them money and they would go and exchange this money. And so there was an enormous amount of risk associated with that. But I loved that process, or that thinking and how that would work. And then when I got to London, I thought, I need a job, And I went for a job at Harrods, which is a department store. And I had my suit and tie on, and I thought I was, this was all going to be great. And because I had worked in a similar sort of location in Australia, and I thought that'd be easy. But the first thing they did was they asked me to write a paragraph about why I should get the job. And I couldn't do that. So I got up and left. And so that then led me to applying for a job. I thought I was applying for a job for a 14-year-old who was disabled, to take them on adventures, to take them to the pool, to take them, whatever it was, to give their parents a break. And I went for this job interview. So I read the job interview wrong. I didn't understand it because I was not taking the data in properly, which is dyslexia. When I arrived, it was actually Mike Nemisfery, who was a very, very famous skier and had done the James Bond stunts and was the ex-British ski champion of the world. And he was 24 and he had broken his neck at C4, which means that he's completely paralyzed from basically here down. And that means there's no feeling whatsoever. So things like bowel movements, everything, nothing works. So you basically got to feed him, you got to do everything for him. And so I went for that job interview and then realized that he had 2 full-time nurses. And I just said, no, look, I can't, this is outside my skill set. He rang me probably 2 weeks later and said, I'm going to Spain. Would you like to come with me? And I said, yeah, that'd be fantastic. I'd love to. So I jumped on a plane, went to Spain with him. And during the process of being in Spain for a week, he said, I want you to come and work for me. He said, I want you to be my nurse. And he explained why. He said, one, because I was stronger and that I could then physically pick him up out of the bath, into planes, into the car, all of that stuff. They were having to use cradles or use mechanical, and it made him feel very, very useless. And so here's a guy who was very proud. He was the world champion at something. He was a James Bond stuntman. He was, a celebrity. And he didn't want to be labelled as somebody that was disabled. And so he went out of his way to make himself as normal as he possibly could. And so little things like, getting him into the car, getting him out of the bath, getting him onto a plane. I used to piggyback him onto the plane. So I became his nurse, and I looked after Mike for 6 months, and I was his only nurse. And so he fired both the other nurses, and so I was the full-time nurse, and I had to do cleaning and everything. But you're in a position where you're really stretched to the alternative of thinking. You've got to be. It's like having a child, but it's an adult, and so you still got to roll him every 2 or 3 hours because other the blood pools and he'll get bed sores. But we travelled all around the world. So we went to he was based in London. We went to Hungary. We went to the US. We travelled all over the US. We went to theme parks. We went skiing together. I put him on my back and we went skiing. And so I just opened up a world for him, which he was so used to, but he'd never been able to do because it was just so uncomfortable for him. Like to get on a plane and you're put in this weird chair, you're strapped in, and everyone's, you go on first, and it makes you look different. Where I just pick him up, put him on my back, and piggyback him in and put him in his chair. We queue up just like everybody else. And that made him feel normal. That was my role. It wasn't necessarily to be the professional nurse, although I still had to do all the nursing things. I learned how to do catheters. I learned how to do all those sorts of things. So, and I think that diversity in thinking and the way in which we do operate and we do process information allowed me to do that. Where if I was a linear person, I would have gone, no, that's too risky. I can't do that. That's outside my comfort zone. So my comfort zone's been very stretched because of the neurodiversity.
I cannot imagine going up to the Iranian border. Of course, I'm a U.S. citizen, so going to Afghanistan usually is considered a bad idea. But going up and going, yes, I'd like to. They touched our boats a few decades back, and we have not forgiven them yet. We don't like people who touch our boats.
No. That's a whole different subject.
I mean, everyone that's in the Navy is autistic. So, yeah, you shouldn't touch people who really like boats. Yeah, you shouldn't touch. You shouldn't touch the name.
She has grown up. Her dad's military. She's grown up around the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Air Force.
They literally named the care and act like their boats are puppy dogs. Huh? They're puppy dogs.
What? Not quite.
They name the boats. They're all female names, aren't they?
So the ships have one whole thing and the boats have another. The boats can be any names. Right. And the ships have to follow whichever class. So it's either former president, a state, or something like that. But
that's a class L.
See, that's a very different thing.
Nobody uses about basically
in Australia, we don't name anything after.
Yeah, don't have genders.
We don't name anything after a politician at all in Australia. And it's I travel a lot to America, and the US, your political system's like a football team. You either barrack for one team or the other, and you really are a diehard supporter of that team. In Australia, we don't even talk about it. I would not know any of my friends who they vote for, nor would I ever ask, nor would we ever discuss it. It's a completely different cultural way of doing things. And we definitely wouldn't name anything after a politician. There's no way that would ever have.
50 minutes.
Thank you. I work politics in my other job, and so she gets to hang around all the politicians, which is really weird because I hung around them as kids, and now I'm listening to her age group talk about learning about them in school, and I'm like, wait, I was there when that thing happened.
Right.
So what? That's old.
Yes, I know I'm old. I also
Dad.
Oh, Dad's old. Okay.
I never said you were old. I said so what? Dad's old.
It's just weird when you work and people are like, "Oh, have you heard of this historical event?" And it's like, "Yes." And their parents were like, "Yeah, I watched that on the news." And you're like, and I was standing like 15 feet away from that.
Wow, amazing.
Well, 51 minutes.
We promised we'd keep this to an hour, John. We are definitely going to have you back on the show if you're okay with it.
Yeah, that's fine. It's been
'Cause
fun. It's been very different.
Yeah. There are so many more stories from your book to tell and so much more to dive into with ADHD and dyslexia. Where can people find you on the internet?
So it's neurodiversity. So again, it's NEURO. So Neuro Spicy .life, and the book's available there. I'll actually give you a code. There's a code called ABC25, and that'll give all of your followers and listeners a 15% discount. That'll be built into it. You can go on there. There's so the book's available digitally, or you can have a physical copy like this. So it's not a massive book, and it's not a this is what you need to do. You know, I'm very much against the, you know, do these 10 steps and eat this food and you know, it will fix you. Mine's more about, well, we're not broken. It's not about fixing us. It's about how do we empower the people that are like us to understand that it is a superpower. But not only is it a superpower, it's also your kryptonite. And so I think that that's probably my fundamental message, is that as much as it can take you on these amazing alternative ways of thinking, it also needs to be controlled and understood, because if you let it take over, then it will become a negative situation for you. And so whether that's in reading and writing, whether that's social, whether that's with your partners, whether it's with your friends, whatever it may be, it needs to be understood that you are going to think alternatively. They're not necessarily going to understand all that. And so sometimes that can be confusing. But if you understand it, then you can actually then really manage that. And I think that's part of the overall end solution that I'm trying to achieve with the book, is that it is without a doubt something that needs to be championed and something needs to be understood and studied for your own benefit. But at the same time is just be careful that it doesn't get too out of control and turns it into a negative for you.
Understandable. So we will have that in the description below. Thank you for spelling it out, because maybe I will remember how to spell neuro again.
I've had to practice it, don't worry. And I've been cheating. I've been reading it off the book. So, but yeah, that's the book there. And the cover was actually done by my son. And you'll see in the website, it's a big painting, and he actually painted it. And so what it is, it's like my brain is like a jigsaw piece. And you know, when you pour out the jigsaw pieces onto the table when you first start, that's a sort of a way of describing what it feels like to be dyslexic and ADHD.
Well, we will make sure everyone should go buy it. I'm only about half of the way through. I wound up having a migraine, a radial, and a stress headache at the same time this week. So reading took a back seat.
Yeah, right. For sure.
But
thanks so much.
It has
for
been
having
amazing
me.
so
really
far.
Enjoyed it.
Thank you for coming on, and we can't wait to talk to you again.
No problem. Thanks very much. See you later.
Well, thank you for watching the podcast, and please subscribe, and also look at that adorable paper. So if you want to subscribe for it, and also please leave a like, and don't forget, if you subscribe to our stuff, you won't miss any of our new podcast stuffies. And also, did you see that adorable paper? Don't you like it?